It's very nice to be in virtual Berlin. So thank you, Volker, for the invitation. So it's a paper about platform duality and network externality. It's joint work, as you say, with Leonardo Maggio from the University of Padova and Shiva Shekhar from the University of Paso. Hi, Shiva. I've seen that you're in the room. Well, in Europe, we are not familiar with this wording of digital gatekeeper or of gatekeeping platform. And the idea is that we have platform that can control access by a group of users to some goods or another group of users. So the idea is that there is some control on the access, gatekeeper, that's what it means. And for instance, the App Store controls the access to iOS device users. So if you do not access the App Store, you cannot reach iOS device user. And similarly, the Amazon Marketplace is critical for many resellers. So we have some platforms that share this gatekeeping feature. And the reasons why they are called gatekeepers is that you have barriers to entry, and barriers to entry came from economies of scales and network externalities. Now, there are a number of cases in which the gatekeeper is also active in the market it organizes. So that's what we call duality. The gatekeeper is an essential service provider and a direct competitor to the third parties. Example, Amazon as a marketplace, but Amazon is also a competitor with its own product, Amazon Basics, but also as a retailer. Apple organized the App Store, but also offers application. Apple One is, for instance, a bundle of apps with TV, music, cloud services, and all these things. So this is duality, being the platform organizer and a competitor at the same time. And these gatekeeping platforms are what we call in the eye of the storms, with many cases against gatekeeping platform. I think the most famous one is Google Shopping. So the idea is that Google used its dominance as a search engine to give unfair advantage to other Google services, in that case, Google Shopping. And lawyers, Volker told me that maybe some lawyers in the room, they call this exclusionary abuse. So, and Google has been fined for that. We have a case that is quite similar ongoing with Amazon, where Amazon is using data from third party to promote its own services. So competition is distorted on the platform, and it's same kind of exclusionary abuse by Amazon. Of course, these two cases are linked to platform duality. And I will mention a third case that is not linked directly to duality, but it's which is important for the talk I will make today, is the ongoing battle with between Epic and Apple Store. So for those who are playing Fortnite, there is this battleground, but there is another one in the US courts. And the story is pretty simple. Epic complained that the price on the Apple Store are too high. Basically, they have to pay too much for being on the App Store. There is no possibility to bypass. And this is not an exclusionary abuse, but what lawyers call exploitative abuse. Basically, they complain that the price is too high. In the follow-up, there are some exclusion because Epic Games have been excluded from the App Store, but basically it followed the complaints of the stories about prices that are too high. And then I do not know if it's all these things is a new story, because in energy, rail, telecom, postal, all this network industry, they have a very long history of discrimination in access terms and condition, giving some unfair advantage to the sister company, giving discriminatory access condition or access price. So this gatekeeper story is a reminder of that. This duality is a reminder of that. You have you have non-transparent and discriminatory access condition to the gatekeeping platform. And I think for that particular reasons, there are attempts to regulate the gatekeeping platform. So Elizabeth Warren, when she was campaigning for the Democrat presidential election, she was making many statements about the platform, and what she proposed is to split platforms in two different parts. So on one end, platform activities, and on the other end, service activities, like we did in Europe for, say, for instance, electricity. We split the grid and service companies. And in Europe, in the Digital Market Act, there is not the idea of splitting platform, but there is the idea of regulating their behavior. And in particular, so in the Digital Market Act contains list of what they call do and don't, what you can do, what you can't do. And in this regulation, self-preferencing will be explicitly forbidden. But self-preferencing is not the topic of the paper. So what we look at is entry by the platform in the market it regulates. And it's not so obvious that there is an incentive to enter in the market as a third party, as a competitor, because, as you know, if you monopolize the bottleneck input, you can collect the monopolistic profit. So there is no need to do more than that. We have this economists, we have this single monopoly profit. So if you own a bottleneck input, that's enough to collect the full monopoly profit. So reasons for entry could be to capture part of the downstream profit, but as I just said, you can ask more from a higher fee from market participants, or you can enter to correct potential inefficiencies in the downstream market, or to make it more competitive. And in the paper, we will consider different possible entry strategy. So the first will be direct entry with a bundle of product. For instance, Apple One is a bundle of product that includes music, TV, games, cloud, and all the services. This will be the main focus of the talk. Then I will talk about acquisition of a competing third party. And the third, I will be short on that, the development of a competing product. And the research question we ask is whether, when, and how gatekeeper adopt a dual role. Second, is it good for consumer? And third, in terms of regulation, should we prohibit entry? Should we prohibit duality? So in a nutshell, what we preview of the result. So in the model I will develop, there is an inefficiency without entry. And the efficiency, I will come to the detail, is the Cournot complementarity. So products exhibit complementarity. We have price, independent pricing leads to price above monopoly level, and it's an inefficiency. And a reason to enter is to remove such an efficiency. And if the firm enters with a bundle, it does not only, if the gatekeeper enters with a bundle, it does not only remove the inefficiency, but it has a pro-competitive effect on price. So at first it seems to be good, but as we have network externalities, entry fragments the demand, and it could reduce the utility of the consumer. So the trade-off from a consumer's point of view is a trade-off between network externality and lower price. And the entry decision and the effect on consumers depends on the strength of network externality. And in terms of policy, we show that banning duality is not necessarily a good solution, and in some case, it could be a bad solution. There is a lot of very recent literature on the topic of duality. We do not find paper older than 2020. I think we should update because most of these papers are not yet published and have been updated in the meantime. And all these papers consider questions that are similar to ours, but most of them are taking entry in the ecosystem and duality as given, while we question the duality. Some papers found a positive impact, others a negative impact, and I will just mention this reference, and I will not enter into the detail. And of course, as we consider entry with a bundle, so we are closely connected to this, but this one is older literature on bundling. So let me go directly to the model. I will enter quite into the details of the model. So suppose we have two unrelated markets. So think of video games and streaming services. We have two firms that we will call third parties. One is producing video game, the other is producing video service. They operate as a monopolist in their respective market, and they offer product at a given price, PI for third party one, P1 for third party one, P2 for third party two. There are three groups of consumers: single-use consumers only interested in video games, single-use consumers only interested in streaming services, and what we call multi-use consumers potentially interested in both video games and streaming services. In the paper, we play with the size of these different groups, in particular with the size of the multi-user segment. But for the talk, I will suppose that these three segments have equal size. And consumers decide to buy or not, depending on the product's price, the network benefit, and the valuation for the product. I will explain that in a moment, but that's pretty standard and simple. The gatekeeping platform allows this interaction between the third parties and the user, so those I mentioned on the previous slide. And there is a compensation for allowing such an interaction, and I will consider an ad valorem compensation with the gatekeeping party collecting a fraction beta of the third party's revenue. And revenue in the model means profit because we suppose all costs normalize to zero. The third party can potentially copy the product of the third parties at no cost. We do not discuss, but I think it's interesting to have more discussion on this sooner or later, say, but because it's one of the things that, for instance, is important in the Amazon case at the European Commission, that Amazon has some information about these goods and products that are fashionable and can copy easily these products. And so the gatekeeper can copy the products, and I will consider entry with a bundle. Now, looking at consumers, so for the single-use consumers, there are two segments, 1 and 2. The utility of a consumer depends on V. V is uniformly distributed on 0, 1, and the utility is V plus theta times di. So the network theta measure the network benefit, and so it's V plus theta di minus the price PI. So that's for a single-use consumer. For a multi-use consumer, well, for a multi-use consumer, the utility looks the same. So if it consumes the two goods, it collects 2V, enjoyed network benefits on good 1, network benefits on good 2, and it pays the total price P1 plus P2. So it pays P1 to firm 1, P2 to firm 2, if it decides to buy from two independent suppliers. From this utility function and the assumption on V, we can derive a demand function we suppose that consumers have an outside option equal to 0. And one specific feature of the model is that the demand from multi-use consumers depends on P1 plus P2, so the total price, provided that they buy the two goods, and which they are not forced to do, so they can buy only one of the two. And that's it, I think, for this slide. The profit of the third parties is, so as I say, they do not pay cost, so they do not have cost, sorry. So the profit is price times demand, but at the end, a fraction B of this revenue should be paid to the gatekeeper, so the third party is left with only a fraction 1 minus beta of the total revenue. The profit from the platform, so I consider two cases. The passive case, so when the platform is passive, it collects a fraction beta of the revenue of the third parties. When it is active, so when it has a dual role. In addition, there is some revenue from the downstream market that I will explain a bit later. Timing of the game important. So the platform decides whether or not to enter the market, and if it decides to enter, it fixes the price. So we have price leadership for the platform. Then the third parties choose their price PI, and then finally consumers decide to buy or not, and if they decide to buy, they decide where to buy. So the structure is like this. So we have third party 1 here, third party 2 here, the three segment of demand, and without entry, single-use consumer and multi-use consumer buy or not from third party 1, single-use consumer here and multi-use consumer buy or not from third party 2. The third party collects revenue and pay a fraction beta to the gatekeeper. Before I solve this problem, I would like to take as a benchmark what happened if we maximize total profit, so the sum of P1 and P2, and the profit maximizing price is equal to 0.5. And interestingly, in this first order condition, because we have multi-use consumer, then the price PI has an impact on the demand for the other product. So the demands are made complementary by this multi-use consumer, and the optimal price is 0.5. If we have what we call the market outcome, firm I decides on its price in order to maximize the profit, so it ignores the impact of price PI on the demand for product J, leading to price above the monopoly level, and that's an inefficiency in the market that we call that is a classical Cournot effect for those who are familiar with that. And this inefficiency, so I do not report the equation for price, which are quite long and ugly, but so you should trust me. But this inefficiency increase with the network externality. So the problem is more pronounced when we have larger network externality. Now, next step, consider that the firm enters with a bundle, and then the market structure looks like that. So we have, so if the equilibrium we're going to consider is an equilibrium that looks like that. The gatekeepers offer a bundle with, say, video streaming and gaming. Single-use consumers who are only interested in gaming will buy from third party 1. Single-use consumer interested in streaming will buy from third party 2. Multi-use consumer interested in both gaming and streaming will buy from the gatekeeper. So the gatekeeper has two sources of income: from multi-use consumers who pay a price PA, and from third party who pay a fraction beta of their revenue. Now, in this market configuration, as single-use consumers, third party serve only single-use consumers, there is no longer such a complementarity. So entry removes the inefficiency linked to the Cournot complementarity. And this third party, they will choose a price equal to 0.5. So the monopoly price, and there is no possibility to have a larger profit than that. Now, the question is to find the price for the bundle, so the PA star. And this PA star should be lower than P1 plus P2, so it should be lower than 1. But it should be much lower than 1, so it cannot be 0.99, and I will explain you why in the next slide. So this configuration I show is an equilibrium if this third party or third party one has no incentive to lower its price P1 in order to capture the multi-use consumers. And so given that firm 2 choose a price equal to 0.5, and given the bundle price, firm 1, third party 1, has the choice between two options. The first option, and this corresponds to the left-hand side of this inequality, is to serve only the single-use consumer with the monopolistic price of 0.5 and collecting the profit, the corresponding profit, or to convince the so lower the price P1 to convince the multi-use consumer, and for that, they must have a larger utility if they buy at price good 1 at price P1, good 2 at price 0.5. So they should have a higher utility with that compared to buying the bundle price, the bundle at the price PA star. So if we want this configuration to be an equilibrium, we need that the price PA star must be such that this inequality is not true. So it means that the firm, the third party one, should prefer to retreat on the single use segment rather than competing with the bundle. And so the price should be lower than the bundle price should be sufficiently low to guarantee that such an equilibrium exists. But this is a remark: if the single-use segment is too small, such an equilibrium may not exist. But for the talk, I suppose the three segments have equal size. So the entry of the gatekeeper has the following impact. First, it's pro-competitive. So first, it removes the Cournot inefficiency. So there is no inefficiency with entry. Second, it's pro-competitive, and it leads to lower price, and lower price for all categories of users. Single user consumers, because the Cournot efficiency is removed, and multi-use consumers, because the bundle is cheaper than the independent products without entry, and also than the independent products with entry. So for third parties, they realize higher profit on single-use consumers because the gatekeeper solves this inefficiency, but they lose one part of the market. So the impact on, so there are positive and negative impact on third parties' profit. So this is the pro-competitive aspect of entry, but there is another important impact is that instead of enjoying, so now there are two versions of each good, and consumers are fraction between these two versions of the good. so network benefits are not as big as before. And so another consequence of entry is that network benefits are fragmented and therefore lower. Now we can compute the profit for the gatekeeper in the two situations and look when it is profitable to enter. And so non-surprisingly, we found that if beta is low enough, then the gatekeeper prefers to enter the market. So for low value of beta, so when it collects a small fraction of the third-party revenue, then the gatekeeper prefers to enter. And this threshold value of beta is decreasing in theta. So it means that if you have stronger network benefits, so under no entry, consumers get a higher utility because of larger network benefits, so and they end up paying higher price, and because they enjoy larger network benefits, in order to convince multi-use consumer, then the gatekeeper should choose a lower price, so entry become less appealing. So it's pretty obvious that without with larger network benefits, then entry is less profitable for the gatekeeper. Now, in terms of consumers, entry reduce price, so consumer surplus increase, but reduce network benefits, so consumer surplus decrease. The balance between the two is positive when network externalities are small and negative otherwise. And we can go further and identify circumstances in which the entry of the platform occurs and it is not beneficial to consumers. But maybe it's easier to look at this figure. So the red line is the difference between consumer surplus without entry and consumer surplus with entry. The blue line is the difference between the gatekeeper's profit with entry and without entry. On the horizontal axis, we measure the strength of the network externality. And in this light blue, green, gray region, we have that consumers have a lower consumer surplus with entry, but the firm has a higher profit. So we have opposed interest. In the gray region, interests are converging. So both the firm and consumer are worse off and without entry, and for large value, they are both better off with entry. So in this region, we have diverging interest between the firm and the consumers. So what we do, so in this setup, an alternative for the firm is to increase the beta, so the ad valorem fee, and eventually the firm would have incentive to increase beta up to the maximum value of 1. But there might be some upper limit in the beta, as it's currently debated in the Apple versus Epic game. So we tried another setup with a per unit fee, and with a per unit fee, increasing the per unit fee increase the distortion in the downstream market with a classical double marginalization problem. So it's possible to compute an optimal fee, an optimal per unit fee for both the entry and the no entry case. So we can compare entry with endogenous per unit fee and no entry with endogenous per unit fee, and we find similar results. So for low value of the network externality, entry with the bundles remain the most profitable option, and sometimes this entry is detrimental to consumers. Now, Next, let me check for the time. Okay. We consider other entry strategies, and in particular, we consider the acquisition. So suppose that the gatekeeper decides to acquire one of the two firms, say firm one. So we have, at the price setting stage, we have competition between the third party number two and the merged entity between the gatekeeper and the firm one. And this merged entity will take into account this externality and will price accordingly. So the merged entity, the platform, will take into account that there is this Cournot complementarity. It has an impact on the profit of firm two, from which it collects a fraction beta. So it partially internalize the externality. So entry or acquisition is another way to solve, partially in this case, the market inefficiency. And we observe lower price for firm one, higher price for firm two because of complementarity, and a lower total price for the multi-use consumers. So the impact on consumers is not as so. There is no fragmentation of the network, so you do not lose. So network benefits are not affected, but you have some consumers ending up paying a lower price. Consumers of firm one, so and multi-use consumers, they pay a lower total price, but some consumers are paying higher price because the price P2 is higher. And then we check, so we consider that to acquire firm one, the gatekeeper must pay the firm's profit in the absence of entry. And which means that if the beta is large, so if the taxation is by the platform is important, then the price to acquire the third party is low. And conversely, if beta is small, then the acquisition price is high. So you pay the price corresponding to this profit counterfactual. And what we show is that there is a value of beta above which there is acquisition. So for large value of beta, the firm the gatekeeper prefers vertical integration and buy the firm to enter the downstream market. Below this value of beta, there is no acquisition. And if we look at the full picture, because here the previous bullet point compares no entry with acquisition, what we do next and last is to do a comparison between no entry with the bundle, and acquisition. And we found that we can have the three different regimes for different value of beta. And using per unit fee, we have the same result. And then, but I have only one slide on that, but another strategy that is often used by platform is not entry, but the threat of entry. So, or we can call this the kill zone. We know that, well, or we know, but in the literature and in those tech blogs, this is highly debated, that in fact many things are super easy to copy in the digital economy. So you have some firms that can be killed by platform. And what means killed by the platform? Basically, there is no need to buy the company because it's easy to copy the features developed by such a company. So imagine that the platform now decides to copy the feature of, say, product one, but we call this entry thread because it says, okay, we're gonna start this new project called product one or gaming, and we will be out in few months. So this might be another way to discipline third parties in the downstream market, and it can be a threat to firm ones, which then will lower the price to avoid entry. There will be a waterbed effect because the other firm will increase its price, and we check whether this strategy could be or not profitable, and we found instances where it is the case. Okay, but now let me move to some words of conclusion and policy implication. So we studied the entry decision and its impact on the market, and we stress on the importance of network effect, because gatekeeper entry is more likely to occur when network effects are small, and when entry occurs, it has two opposite effects. First, a pro-competitive effect, but there could be a fragmentation of demand, which is detrimental to consumers. And gatekeeper can the entry of the gatekeeper can hurt consumers when network externalities are large. So policy that ban gatekeeper duality or regulate commission fee may have unintended effects that potentially harm consumers. So we should be cautious with regulation that are too strict in some sense, because they may have unexpected effect. And in terms of policy implications, so if you regulate the commission fee, for instance, you impose a price cap or you prohibit excessive or unfair pricing, so you limit the beta, then you will generate more entry by the gatekeeper, but it's not necessarily a good news. Second, if you have a complete laissez-faire approach, then entry might be detrimental to consumer. And if instead you've banned duality, you may have the market which is less efficient and less competitive. So it's not easy from our model to find a one-size-fits-all regulation. And finally, one of the things that is certainly beneficial to consumers is to favor interoperability and portability, because one of the negative effects we identified in this paper is the fragmentation of the network externality, the fragmentation of the demand, and the associated reduction in network externalities. If you have more compatibility between goods, of course, this effect decreases and remains only the pro-competitive effect. Okay, I'm done, and I will be happy to answer the question. Thank you for listening.